Let's begin here, because too many still believe desire is born only on the surface. A polished appearance, a carefully chosen outfit, a perfect photo online, these are mistaken for true magnetism. Yet we all know women who do not shine with movie star beauty, but who leave a mark far deeper than the glamorous ones ever could. They enter a room quietly, and somehow every presence bends toward them. They do not need to chase or to prove or to beg. Their power is not loud, but it is undeniable. It rests in something most overlook, the way they awaken the unseen in another person. For attraction that lasts is not written on the skin, it is carried in the soul. Before I continue, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if reflections like this resonate, don't forget to like and subscribe. We have been conditioned to chase the visible. From youth, many women are told that their worth lies in being chosen, admired, or conquered. They believe the body must be displayed. The smile perfected the role rehearsed. But this belief leaves them exhausted, because what is gained through the mask fades quickly. A gaze may linger for a moment, but it drifts away as soon as novelty dies. The truth, as Jung observed, is that the persona, our outer mask, can never hold love by itself. It hides, but it does not connect. True connection begins in the invisible. It is not about what you show, but about what another person feels when they are near you. A calm presence can quiet his restless mind. A word spoken with authentic warmth can stay with him longer than hours of practiced performance. Jung taught that the soul longs not for masks, but for recognition. It seeks the mirror that reflects what is unspoken within. Think of this as the hidden center of desire. His mind, his inner world is filled with fears, longings, ambitions, and contradictions. To touch that realm is to touch the part of him that rarely finds expression, and it is here that a woman of depth becomes unforgettable. She does not only reach his senses, she reaches his story, his shadow, his unhealed parts. And because of this, her presence lingers even in absence. This is where our journey begins. To move beyond the surface, to move past the endless chase of appearances, and to remember that true feminine power lies in awakening what is unseen. From this foundation, everything else becomes clear. From the beginning, many are taught the same lesson, that a woman's value lies in how she is seen. She must be appealing, polished, agreeable. Her worth is measured by attention, received by how much others approve, by how quickly she can be chosen. The pattern seems harmless, at first like a common ritual of growing up, yet it carves a wound beneath the surface. Because when worth is given by others, it can also be taken away in an instant. This is the first fracture. It appears quietly like a crack in glass that begins small, but spreads until the whole pane trembles. She tries to shine through her appearance, through effort, through performance. But instead of love, what often returns is exhaustion. She gives more, hoping that more giving will secure devotion. Yet what she receives in return feels thin, like a shadow of real connection. Carl Jung observed that what is repressed always seeks expression. In this case, the true self, The authentic feminine soul becomes buried beneath the mask. The persona, the outward image, crafted to please, becomes heavy. She may look perfect to others, yet inside, she feels invisible, unseen for who she really is. This conflict between the mask and the inner truth is the seed of deep suffering. It is here that relationships falter. A man may be drawn to the surface at first, but the connection does not last because it does not reach him fully. He may enjoy her beauty, her charm, her efforts, but he does not surrender. For surrender of the heart only happens when the soul is touched. And when this is missing, she feels the emptiness keenly. She wonders why her giving is not enough, why love feels so unsteady, why she remains unchosen despite all her effort. This is not her personal failure. It is the conditioning of an entire culture that has confused attraction with love, attention with respect, conquest with devotion. The fracture is collective, not individual. Yet each woman must discover it for herself. She notices it in the patterns that repeat relationships that begin with intensity but end with silence moments, when she feels adored in public but lonely in private times, when she offers her heart but receives only fragments in return. The shadow of this conditioning whispers cruelly. It says, if you were more beautiful, he would stay. Or if you tried harder, he would see your worth. This inner voice keeps her bound, repeating the cycle of striving. But no matter how much she gives, the hunger remains. Because what is being sought cannot be found on the surface. In Jungian language, this is the confrontation with the false self. The persona is necessary. It helps us live among others, play roles, carry responsibilities. But when identity fuses too tightly with the mask, the soul is starved. The fracture grows wider. The woman feels divided. Part of her knows she is more than appearance, more than pleasing, more than being chosen. Yet another part clings to the old belief, afraid that without it, she will not be loved at all. This tension plays out not only in romance, but in daily life. A smile is forced to keep peace. A boundary is softened to avoid rejection. Hours are spent perfecting the external, while the internal longs for rest. It is the paradox of modern living, surrounded by mirrors, yet rarely reflected truthfully. The fracture deepens because the outer world praises the mask, while the inner world mourns the absence of authenticity. Think of the woman who pours herself endlessly into others, into partners, into family, into roles that demand sacrifice. Outwardly, she seems strong, accommodating, successful. Yet inwardly, she feels depleted, unseen, quietly resentful. She is praised for her giving, but the praise does not nourish her. This is the wound of being valued only for what she provides, never for who she is. Jung would say, the shadow of self-neglect is demanding to be faced. The first fracture is painful because it reveals that what she was taught no longer works. The old strategies, being beautiful enough, being patient enough, being good enough, do not bring the devotion she hoped for. She begins to sense that something deeper is missing, though she may not yet have words for it. This awareness is both unsettling and liberating, for what begins as disillusionment is often the doorway to truth. At this stage, many retreat into patterns of overcompensation. They chase harder, give more, adjust endlessly, hoping to restore balance. But the balance cannot return because the foundation itself is cracked. To heal, she must turn inward. She must ask, what have I sacrificed to keep the mask intact? What part of myself have I silenced to be accepted? What truth have I abandoned so that others would not abandon me? These questions are the beginning of individuation, the process Jung described as becoming whole. To face the fracture is to admit the mask cannot hold, and in that admission, a new path begins to open. But at first, it feels like loss. She may grieve the years spent striving, the energy poured into illusions, the affection given without return. Grief is natural here. It clears the ground for new life. The fracture is not an end. It is the first sign that the old ways no longer serve. It is the pressure that cracks the shell so the soul inside can breathe. What once felt like failure now reveals itself as invitation. The call to move beyond surface games into depth, beyond the persona, into the true self. We see this clearly when we observe relationships that thrive not on surface allure, but on mutual recognition. They are marked by authenticity, presence, respect. A woman who honors her own soul cannot be satisfied with shallow gestures. She knows the difference between being admired and being valued, between being desired and being loved. And once she knows, she cannot unknow it. This is why the first fracture is so important. It destabilizes the old order, yes, but it also makes space for something real to emerge. Without it, she might remain trapped forever in the endless cycle of pleasing, performing, and hoping. With it, she begins to awaken. The shadow once denied is brought to light. The mask, once mistaken for identity, begins to loosen. And in that loosening, the possibility of true connection is born. Because no one can love what is only a mask. Love requires the courage of presence. And so the story moves forward. From this fracture, from this painful recognition that appearance alone cannot sustain love, a new journey begins. It is the journey inward into the hidden world, where soul meets soul, where the roots of desire grow, where individuation becomes not a theory, but a lived necessity. This is the threshold. The mask is cracking. The old lessons are dissolving, and the shadow is stirring. Ahead lies the confrontation between outer persona and inner truth. But for now, it is enough to acknowledge the wound, to see clearly that the surface is no longer enough, and to honor the fracture as the first step toward wholeness. When the fracture appears, the surface begins to lose its power. What once held her together, the approval, the admiration, the role of being pleasing, no longer satisfies. And in that moment, she begins to glimpse the deeper struggle. For underneath the polished persona that has carried her through the world, another presence has always lived. That presence is the shadow. Jung described the persona as the mask we wear before society. It is not false in itself, but it is incomplete. It is the part of us that smiles when we are tired, that agrees when we wish to say no, that conforms to expectations so that we may belong. The persona is useful. Without it, life would be raw and chaotic. Yet when a person clings to the mask as their only identity, the cost becomes unbearable. The shadow gathers in silence, pressing for recognition. The shadow contains all that has been denied. In a woman who has learned to live only for appearance, the shadow may hold her resentment, her anger, her envy of others who seem freer, her own hunger for authentic love. These energies do not vanish simply because they are hidden. They surface in subtle ways, in exhaustion that never fades, in irritation at small things, in dreams that reveal what she cannot say aloud. This is where the real conflict unfolds. The mask insists she must remain lovely, agreeable, desirable. The shadow demands she be seen as she truly is, flawed. Longing complex, yet real. The two forces collide and the tension feels unbearable. She cannot continue to pretend, yet she fears that if she shows her truth, she will be rejected. Here lies the cost of living only through persona. A woman may gain admiration, but feel unseen. She may be desired, yet never truly known. She may be surrounded by others, yet experience profound loneliness. The mask gives her a role, but not a home. It shields her, but it also isolates her. And the longer she hides, the louder the shadow becomes. Jung warned that whatever is not brought to consciousness will return as fate. If she does not face her shadow, she may repeat the same painful cycles in love again and again. She may attract partners who only mirror her mask men, who want her beauty, but not her soul men, who take her giving, but never see her depth. She wonders why the pattern repeats, unaware that it is her own denied self calling for attention. This recognition is painful, but it is also the threshold of transformation. For to face the shadow is to reclaim what was lost. Her anger may hold the seed of courage. Her envy may reveal her hidden desires. Her loneliness may point to the need for authenticity. Each rejected part is not an enemy, but a messenger. Each shadowed quality carries energy that, once integrated, becomes strength. Consider how this plays out in the heart. When she lives only through persona, her love is conditional on being accepted. She gives to be chosen. She sacrifices to be safe. But when she begins to integrate the shadow, her love becomes truer. She no longer hides her needs or denies her truth. She risks being seen fully, and in that risk, she gains the possibility of a deeper connection. There is also a danger in denying the shadow for too long. The unacknowledged resentment may explode in destructive ways. The hunger for attention may lead her into relationships that wound her further. The ignored longing may turn into bitterness. The shadow, if left in the dark, does not disappear. It distorts, twists, and eventually erupts. This is why Jung insisted that wholeness comes not from perfection, but from integration. To integrate is to turn toward the shadow with honesty. It is to admit, yes, I have hidden my truth. Yes, I have worn the mask for too long. Yes, I am tired of being what others want. These confessions are not weakness. They are the first steps toward freedom. For once the truth is spoken, the mask begins to loosen. She discovers she can breathe again. The paradox is striking. What she feared would drive love away, the revelation of her flaws, her complexity, her depth, is exactly what allows true love to take root. A man cannot surrender to a mask, but he may surrender to the presence of a woman who dares to be whole. Wholeness does not mean flawless. It means that light and shadow, persona and truth, are no longer at war. This confrontation with the shadow is not a single event. It is an ongoing process. Each stage of life brings new masks and new shadows, yet the principle remains: the more we deny, the more the shadow controls us from the dark. The more we acknowledge, the more the shadow transforms into power. Jung compared this to alchemy, the turning of lead into gold. The lead is the heaviness of denial. The gold is the energy released through honesty. In relationships, this shift changes everything. When she no longer hides behind persona, she no longer attracts only shallow devotion. She begins to draw to herself men who sense her authenticity, who respond to her depth, who respect her boundaries. This does not mean every connection lasts forever, but it means each one is real. And reality, even when painful, is far more nourishing than illusion. At this stage, she may feel unsettled. The old mask still tempts her. It feels safer to remain admired than to risk rejection. Yet she also feels the stirrings of her inner truth demanding expression. This is the tension of individuation, the old self resisting the new self calling. To walk this path requires courage, but the alternative, returning to the mask alone, offers no peace. The imagery of mirrors helps us here. The persona is like a polished mirror reflecting what others expect. The shadow is like the distorted reflection that appears when the mirror cracks. At first, the broken image frightens us. Yet in the fracture, we see what was hidden, the deeper lines of the soul, the unfiltered truth of our being. Only by embracing both reflections can we see the whole face. This is why the shadow cannot be ignored. It is not an intruder, but an essential part of the self. When she dares to face it, she discovers resources she never knew she had. She learns that her anger protects her boundaries. Her sadness deepens her empathy. Her envy teaches her what she truly desires. Even her longing for recognition, once acknowledged, points her back to self-love. The shadow, then, is not the enemy of love. It is the guardian of authenticity. Without it, she remains trapped in performance. With it, she becomes real. And real presence is magnetic. A woman who knows her shadow does not need to chase attention. She radiates a power that is undeniable because it comes from wholeness. As we move forward, this confrontation between shadow and persona will open the path to awakening. The mask has cracked. The fracture has revealed what lies beneath. Now, she stands at the threshold of a new awareness that love, devotion, and respect can only grow when the shadow is welcomed into the light. Awakening rarely begins with triumph. More often, it begins with quiet recognition. After the fracture and the confrontation with the shadow, there comes a moment when the mask no longer holds authority. What once seemed unquestionable now appears fragile. The woman who has lived by approval and performance begins to see through the illusion, and what she sees is both unsettling and liberating. The path to true connection does not begin with the body, nor with the mask, but with the soul. Jung reminded us that the unconscious speaks in images, symbols, and subtle impressions. It does not shout, it whispers. In this awakening stage, the woman learns to listen differently to herself and to others. She begins to notice that the most powerful connections are not created by grand gestures or polished appearances. They are born in the pauses, the silences, the small but meaningful exchanges that reach beyond surface interaction. What she once dismissed as unimportant now becomes the very fabric of intimacy. This shift feels like turning toward a new language, a language of the soul. It is not spoken with perfect words, but with presence, a sustained gaze that holds honesty, a silence that carries weight, a phrase that suggests, without explaining all of these, create space for imagination and emotional resonance. Here the awakening deepens. She understands that the male heart, like the female, longs not for conquest, but for recognition. It is not seduction of the body that creates devotion, but the stirring of the unseen self. Symbolically, this stage is like stepping into a dimly lit room and realizing the furniture was always there, though hidden in shadow. The mind, with its longings, fears, and contradictions, was always the true center of desire. She now learns to move within this space gently, with curiosity and respect. She no longer seeks to control, but to understand. No longer desperate to impress, she instead seeks to resonate. Mystery becomes her ally. Where once she felt pressured to reveal everything at once to prove her worth, to chase security, she now learns the art of restraint. Mystery does not mean manipulation. It means leaving room for another person's imagination to awaken, for their inner world to join the dance. She sees that the strongest bonds are created not by rushing toward satisfaction, but by cultivating anticipation. Just as a seed grows in the dark before breaking into light, desire grows in the space between words, in the patience of not giving everything at once. In this way, awakening is not only about understanding others, it is also about returning to the self. The woman learns to listen to her own silences, to respect her own pauses, to trust her own rhythms. What once felt like weakness, slowness, quietness, restraint, now reveals itself as strength. By honoring her inner timing, she discovers she is no longer hostage to the reactions of others. She can let them wonder, let them imagine, let them come closer on their own terms. Her energy shifts from seeking approval to radiating presence. This change is deeply Jungian in nature. Individuation, the path to wholeness, is not about discarding the shadow or the persona, but about learning to balance them. In awakening, the woman begins to embody this balance. She does not deny her beauty or her charm, but she no longer relies on them alone. She does not reject her mask completely, but she refuses to confuse it with her true identity. She accepts her shadow not as an enemy, but as a source of power. From this integration, her presence becomes magnetic, not because she tries, but because she simply is. The awakening also brings clarity about love itself. She begins to see that what endures is not the thrill of conquest, nor the flattery of fleeting desire. What endures is the feeling she evokes in another person, the sense of being seen, understood, and valued beyond appearances. When she touches this deeper dimension, she leaves a mark that cannot be erased by time or distance. She becomes unforgettable, not because she demands attention, but because she awakens the other's most human self. This is the turning point. The old belief was that to win love, she must be chosen, admired, or pursued. The awakening reveals the opposite. True love is not about conquest, but about connection. It is not about being taken, but about being met. The power lies not in seeking to be enough for someone else, but in recognizing that she already carries the presence that can transform a relationship. From this new awareness, her choices begin to change. She no longer feels compelled to compete to exhaust herself trying to hold attention. Instead, she cultivates authenticity. She discovers that a single authentic moment, one glance that conveys truth, one silence that carries depth outweighs hours of performance. She sees that connection is not measured by intensity alone, but by resonance. And resonance arises when two inner worlds touch, however briefly, without masks. The awakening is also spiritual. Jung spoke often of the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine dimensions of the psyche. In awakening, the woman begins to sense this inner polarity within herself. She realizes that by touching the mind and soul of another, she is also reconciling her own inner masculine, the part of her that seeks action, direction, and purpose. This reconciliation gives her a sense of balance. She no longer chases love to complete her, for she has begun to integrate the masculine within. She does not need to be conquered. She needs only to share from a place of wholeness. This realization brings serenity. Where once she felt frantic, afraid to lose, afraid to be abandoned, she now feels grounded. She understands that what she offers is not surface attraction, but the depth of her being. And depth cannot be replaced easily. It lingers. It imprints, it endures. Her energy changes from anxious to calm, from demanding to receptive. And paradoxically, it is this calmness that draws others closer, for true presence is rare and irresistible. Awakening also means releasing the obsession with outcome. She no longer measures success by whether a particular man stays or leaves. Instead, she measures it by her own alignment with truth. Did she remain authentic? Did she honor her silence when words would have been empty? Did she speak from clarity rather than fear? These questions replace the frantic search for validation, and with them comes peace. The imagery of fire can illuminate this stage. Before she tried to burn brightly, consuming herself to keep attention. In awakening, she learns to tend a steady flame. It does not flare recklessly, nor does it fade easily. It provides warmth without depletion, light without exhaustion. This flame is her authenticity, her self-respect, her inner presence. And it is this flame that others feel often without knowing why. The awakening is not the end of the journey, but it is the beginning of transformation. From this point, she sees the world differently. She understands that love without respect is hollow, that desire without recognition is fleeting, and that presence without authenticity is merely performance. She recognizes that what she seeks outside can only be sustained if it first exists within. And so she begins to practice this new way of being. She experiments with pauses, with restraint, with mystery. She allows herself to speak less, to observe more, to trust silence. She notices how others respond not with indifference, but with heightened interest. For mystery awakens imagination, and imagination awakens desire. She sees that her greatest power lies not in controlling the other, but in radiating from her own center. This is the essence of awakening, the shift from seeking to being, from chasing to embodying, from mask to authenticity. It is the recognition that true magnetism comes not from what is shown, but from what is felt. The body follows where the soul has already been touched. And now, having seen through the mask, having faced the shadow, and having discovered the language of the soul, she stands ready for the next stage. Awakening has given her vision, but vision alone is not enough. To live this truth, she must now make a choice. She must set a boundary, take a stand, and embody her transformation in action. That is where the journey leads next, into the moment of decision, where authenticity becomes not only an inner state, but an outer standard. Awakening brings vision, but vision alone does not transform a life. Once she has seen the truth that masks cannot sustain love, that shadow must be integrated, that connection begins in the soul. She is faced with a decision. Awareness demands action. A woman cannot carry new clarity into old patterns without deep unrest. The next step is not simply to know, but to choose. This choice appears in moments that seem small, yet they hold great weight. It is the choice to remain silent when she would once have explained herself endlessly. It is the choice to walk away when the attention offered is thin, when crumbs are disguised as devotion. It is the choice to define what she will accept and what she will no longer allow. Such decisions mark the beginning of transformation because they move her truth from an inner awareness into an outer standard. Jung often reminded us that individuation requires boundary. Without boundary, the self dissolves into the expectations of others. With boundary, the self can stand whole. For the woman who has lived for approval, this realization is radical. She discovers that to honor her soul, she must say no as often as yes. She must protect her energy not as a defense against love, but as a condition for real love to exist. There is a profound difference between demands and standards. Demands are shouted outward, trying to control others. Standards are quiet truths lived inward, guiding how she allows herself to be treated. In the past, she may have begged for reassurance, asking to be valued. Now she learns that true power is not in begging, but in choosing. By living her standards, she communicates more strongly than words ever could. This is the heart of the transformation. She no longer proves her worth by overgiving, nor does she chase to hold another's attention. Instead, she embodies self-worth through her boundaries. She becomes the one who sets the tone of connection. She will not stay where there is disrespect. She will not diminish herself to keep peace. And by doing so, she teaches others how to meet her, not through fear, but through respect. Symbolically, this moment is like stepping across a threshold. Behind her lies the familiar room of performance and striving, safe but suffocating. Ahead of her lies the unknown, an open landscape where she may walk in her own rhythm. The threshold itself feels daunting because it requires her to leave behind the security of old habits. But she knows now that clinging to the old is a slow form of self-betrayal. Crossing into the new requires courage, but also brings liberation. When she sets boundaries, she also shifts the balance of power. In the old pattern, his recognition defined her. In the new, her recognition defines him. He must now show, through his actions, whether he is capable of meeting her standard. Some may withdraw, unsettled by her strength. Others may rise to meet her truth. Either way, she is no longer captive to the mask. Her energy is free because her worth is no longer negotiated. This act of choice is also the beginning of respect. Jung noted that respect grows from authenticity, not from submission. A man may desire many women, but he respects the one who refuses to betray herself. He understands consciously or unconsciously that she cannot be played with. Her boundary is not a wall of bitterness. It is a gate of dignity. Those who cannot honor it fall away. Those who can remain. It is here that the old fear often stirs, the fear of loss, the fear of abandonment. Yet she now sees that clinging to love that dishonors her is the deeper loss. Better to walk in solitude with integrity than to remain in company that erodes her soul. This truth, once lived, becomes freedom. For when she no longer fears being alone, she is never truly alone. She carries her own center within. This transformation is visible in subtle ways. She no longer rushes to respond to every message because she trusts her own timing. She no longer accepts last-minute invitations that treat her as an afterthought because she values her own presence. She no longer explains her boundaries in endless detail because her actions speak with clarity. Each of these small acts of self-respect adds up to a new way of being. Imagine her as a tree that once bent toward every wind, desperate to avoid breaking. Now, her roots have grown deep. She does not resist every breeze, but she no longer bends until she snaps. Her stability makes her beautiful, and others feel it. They sense the strength that lies beneath her calmness. She does not need to declare her worth. It is lived. From the Jungian view, this is individuation in practice. She has turned inward, faced her shadow seen through the mask, and awakened to her truth. But individuation is not complete until it becomes embodied. The body must live what the soul has seen. This embodiment happens through choice, through boundaries, through the refusal to abandon herself. It is not always easy, but it is always liberating. In relationships, the change is profound. Men who once stayed on the surface now feel compelled to engage more deeply, or else they fade away. Those who approach her with half-hearted attention are unsettled, for they realize they cannot treat her casually. But those who are capable of real connection are drawn to her with greater respect because her standard clarifies their own. By choosing herself, she inspires others to choose with greater clarity. This transformation also softens her energy. Ironically, when she no longer grasps, she no longer appears desperate. When she no longer explains, her words carry more weight. When she no longer proves her presence alone is enough. The paradox becomes clear. By holding boundaries, she becomes freer to give authentically. By refusing to beg, she becomes more magnetic. By protecting her heart, she opens the way for true devotion. The symbolic imagery of fire returns here. Before, she burned wildly, hoping the flame of effort would keep love alive. Now, her flame burns steady. Boundaries act as the hearth shaping the fire, so it does not consume her. This steady light attracts, warms, and endures. Others feel safe in its glow because they sense it will not flicker with every passing wind. Choice and boundary also reveal her relationship to herself. She no longer asks, "Will he value me?" but rather, "Am I valuing myself in this moment?" She no longer wonders, "Will he stay?" but instead, "Am I staying true to my soul?" These questions bring her back to her center, and from that center, she discovers that love is not about being chosen. It is about choosing consciously both herself and the connections she allows. The transformation is not a final destination, it is a practice. Each day brings moments that test her standards, moments that invite her back into old patterns. But now she carries a compass. She knows the difference between love that nourishes and love that depletes. She knows that authenticity is not negotiable, and she knows that every boundary she honors deepens her wholeness. By choosing in this way, she becomes not only a partner, but a presence. She becomes a woman who is respected, remembered, and cherished, not because she demanded devotion, but because she lived as one who could not be forgotten. This is the gift of transformation. It is not the end of longing, but the redirection of longing toward what is real. And so we arrive at the threshold of closure. She has crossed from illusion into authenticity, from mask into presence, from fear into self-worth. The journey has been marked by fracture, shadow awakening, and now choice. Ahead lies the final stage where these truths are integrated into a lasting lesson. For transformation becomes wisdom only when it settles into the heart as lived reality. Every journey must find its completion, not as an ending, but as an integration. The path we have walked together has moved from fracture to shadow, from awakening to transformation. Now we arrive at closure, where truth settles into wisdom. The lesson is clear. Love that is built only on the surface fades quickly. Desire that feeds only on appearance cannot endure. But love that begins in the soul, love that touches the unseen, becomes unforgettable. A woman who chooses to live from her inner worth does not need to chase. She does not need to explain or demand. Her presence alone carries the message that once required so many words. Jung often spoke of individuation as the process of becoming whole. That wholeness is not perfection, nor is it the absence of struggle. It is the integration of all, that we are the persona we show the shadow. We hide the spirit we long to embody. In this integration, a woman discovers that she is already enough. She does not need to be chosen to prove her value. She is valuable because she lives in alignment with her soul. The essence of this journey is not about controlling others. It is not about making anyone surrender. It is about reclaiming the power that was always hers. The power of presence, the power of boundary, the power of self-respect. From that foundation, relationships change naturally. A man does not surrender because he is manipulated. He surrenders because he recognizes authenticity and he cannot ignore it. Think of it like a flame tended carefully in the hearth. A wildfire burns hot, but quickly fades. A steady fire warms the room, draws others close, and endures through the night. This is the energy of a woman who knows her worth. Her boundaries shape the flame. Her authenticity fuels it. Her calmness allows it to burn without consuming her. And because of this, she becomes unforgettable. The deeper lesson is universal. Whether man or woman, young or old, the path of the soul is the same. We must all move beyond masks, confront the shadow, awaken to truth, and live that truth through choice. The journey is not about becoming someone else. It is about remembering who we already are when the noise falls away. A woman who reaches this place no longer fears absence. She knows that if one connection fades, it was not meant to endure. She knows that if she stands alone, she still stands whole. And because of this, her presence in love is not desperate, but free. She loves from abundance, not from lack. She gives without losing herself. She touches the soul before the body, and in doing so, she awakens devotion that no surface gesture could ever create. The closing truth is this: a woman who respects herself deeply teaches the world how to respect her. She does not have to fight to be valued because her very being communicates her worth. Jung reminded us that what we believe about ourselves becomes our reality. When she sees herself as powerful, worthy, and whole, the world reflects it back to her. So let us rest here for a moment. The mask has been set aside. The shadow has been faced. The soul has been honored. And through boundary and choice, transformation has been lived. This is individuation, not a theory, but a lived truth. It is the moment when the inner and the outer align and peace begins to radiate outward. As we close, remember, this true attraction does not come from effort alone. It comes from resonance. It is the silent recognition that what is most human in one soul has been seen and honored by another. That is what endures. That is what makes someone unforgettable. Before we part, I invite you to reflect. Which part of this journey spoke most deeply to you? The fracture that revealed the wound, the shadow that demanded honesty, the awakening of soul, or the transformation of boundary? Share your reflections in the comments below. Your story may be the mirror that helps someone else recognize their own. And as you carry these words forward, hold this truth gently. Your value is not measured by how much others desire you, but by how faithfully you honor yourself. When you live from that center, you need not raise your voice to be heard. Your presence will always be enough.